and welcome to the show. My guest today is Carles Puigdemont, the former president of Catalonia in Spain, who spearheaded the region's peaceful drive for independence in 2017. His push for an independence referendum, which was held in October 2017, put him on a collision course with the Spanish authorities. The referendum was declared illegal, and Mr. Puigdemont ended up in exile in Belgium after being accused of sedition and misuse of public funds. At the time, 4 other ministers who had served in his administration also fled Spain. But Mr. Puigdemont's exile in Belgium didn't prevent him from continuing in politics. In 2019, he was elected as a member of the European Parliament, which gave him certain protections because he was a member of an EU Assembly. However, earlier this month, the majority of MEPs voted to lift the parliamentary immunity of Mr. Puigdemont and his 2 Catalan colleagues who were also elected to the European Parliament. That vote could pave the way for their extradition back to Spain, where they will almost certainly face jail if they go on trial. In 2019, Spain sentenced 9 other Catalan leaders to between 9 and 13 years in prison over their role in the independence referendum. Well, I caught up with Mr. Puigdemont over the internet after that fateful European Parliament vote, and I first asked him for his reaction to it.
Well, thank you very much, first of all, to inviting me. Well, we expected these decisions. It actually was nothing new on our expectations. So, well, the fight continues, and our situation has not changed in practical, because we continue to still be European member of the European Parliament. And we are waiting for the decision of the Belgian authorities now.
So what is going to happen? Is there a possibility that because that parliamentary immunity has been lifted, that you could now potentially face arrest in Belgium and indeed in some other EU countries if you go outside of Belgium?
Not exactly in Belgium, because our case is in the hands of the Belgian justice. So is now on the side of the Belgian authorities to decide exactly what will happen with us. But you are right. In the Schengen space, there is a high risk to be arrested. So that affects in some way our activity. That we must not forget that in our times, all the MEPs must do their work through technologies, through video calls. So in practical, the affectation in the short term is not very serious, but the threat is there. It can be arrested, of course.
And why don't you go back to Spain and go and go to the courts for the trial on the charges that you are facing? Why don't you just go back and face the music?
For one big reason, because there is no one possibility to have a fair trial in my case. There is no independent justice in Spain. And if I want to continue acting as a politician, do politics, the only place to do this is from another space inside the European Union, where my rights are protected or respected. And this is obvious. My colleagues are all in jail, were condemned, were put in pretrial detention for more than 2 years. And there is no possibility to, for example, giving interviews like this, or to have to be in the European Parliament, to do nothing if I return. But the main reason is it's absolutely impossible to have a fair trial there.
But the charges that you face, ones of sedition and misuse of public funds, are very serious. Do you in any way accept that there may be reasons why you have been charged for those very serious charges?
Our case, exactly as for my colleagues who are in jail, is a clear case of political persecution. That is clear. We are persecuted for our ideas and for have done all our commitments in front of our parliament in order to organize a referendum self-determination. So sedition or rebellion or misuse of funds are in fact the tools in order to prevent us to do politics. Is one way to persecuting the pro-independence movements in Catalonia. And on the other hand, for one side, the crime of sedition is a crime comes from the 19th century. It's not a crime for our time. What is exactly sedition means in our time? And then the misuse of funds. Or you can find a public statements made by the former Spanish Prime Minister in the Spanish Parliament saying explicitly there was no one single public euro for organizing such referendum. So it's obvious they are using such crimes in order to persecute our ideas.
But the Spanish courts already, as you indicated earlier, Mr. Puigdemont, they did find some of the Catalan separatists who participated in organising that referendum guilty of those very same charges.
Yeah, that which is exactly a proof that there is a clear political intentions to ban off all leaders, Catalan leaders, to out of the politics, out to do politics. All of my colleagues that are in jail are peaceful people, are pro-democratic, non-violent, with a strong commitment to human rights. All were involved in political movements in favor of democracy. No one of them are guilty of no crime. It's absolutely out of sense to accuse, to persecute members of the public government or members of the parliament, the former speaker of the Catalan parliament, for example, for allowing a debate. So, what exactly sedition means in our times? According to the Spanish Penal Code, that crime needs the use of violence. The only violence we seen at the time was come from the Spanish police with peaceful citizens that tried to participate in the referendum. So it's a political case, and there's no way to solve it.
But let's just go back to the European Parliament vote then. In your case, over some 400 MEPs voted to lift your parliamentary immunity. Now, a considerable number voted the opposite way, for that parliamentary immunity not to be lifted. And I spoke with an Irish MEP, Frances Fitzgerald, from the European People's Party group, asking her why she voted to lift your parliamentary immunity. And her response was that they accept the Spanish judicial system, they believe it is fair, they do not have a problem with the rule of law in Spain, and therefore they felt that the parliamentary immunity had to be lifted so that you and your fellow Catalan MEPs would face the judicial system back in Spain. So what do you have to say to the arguments they made about the fact that they don't think there is an issue with the Spanish courts back in Spain?
Well, there is a clear message come from the European Parliament because quite to back the Spanish position. It's not the figures you can find in other immunity cases voted in the European Parliament. The majority of them are voted unanimously. So close to 300 MEPs has serious doubts that there is a political persecution. In another side, there is a decision of the Belgian authorities, saying, in the case of our colleague Luis Puig, former Catalan Minister of Culture, they decided to refuse the extradition because there is a high fundamental right, the right of presumption of innocence, and that is not a sign of a strong juridical system or strong democracy. There is a problem in Europe, in Spain. It's not only in Poland or in Hungary. There is a problem in Spain with the rule of law.
So let's get back then to the actual vote of independence and the decision in September to hold the referendum in 2017 and then the actual independence referendum itself in October 2017. Given what has happened now, Mr. Puigdemont, are you sorry? Do you regret the fact that you pushed for and enabled that independence referendum in 2017?
Not at all. On the contrary, we are very proud to organize a referendum in order to bring the opportunity to the Catalan people to express their will about what kind of relationship must have between Catalonia and Spain. That is a sign of strong democracy. There is a conflict, and the only way we believe to solve political conflicts is allowing people to decide. And for this, despite all the threats, despite the violence used by the Spanish police, all the repression, we won that day. It was a day of victory of democracy. More than 2 million people voted uh, in that referendum. So we are very proud of this. And we are right to bring the possibility to the Catalan people to decide, because that is the consensus existing in Catalan society, even among Catalan people who are against independence. They want to decide, they want to vote. So I personally had that commitment in front of my parliament. So as a politician, I'm very proud to pay honor at that commitment in the parliament. So I mean, nothing to say sorry or nothing to sorry in this case.
But now we know there was a lot of police force used during that independence referendum. Polling stations were closed. It was difficult for people to vote, but only about 43% of Catalans managed to vote. Now, some 92% of those voters voted for independence. But how representative then was that poll that took place if only 43% of those who voted, or 43% at least of the electorate, were able to vote?
It was a number higher than the normal figures in the majority of the referendums. For example, in the case of the Brexit, there was less people from a general register of the voters who participate in the referendum, or that was the case of the European Constitution referendum in Spain, or the referendum asking Spanish people to join or not NATO in the earlier 80s, or the referendum for the Catalan Statute of Autonomy in 2006. All of these referendums were less participation than our in the 1st of October 2017. But I understand your question. Of course, it's a very important thing to decide, and so we expected more participation on this case. But don't forget, there was a threat, a clear threat from the Spanish state against voters, against organizers, against ballot boxes, ballot papers. Was a clear success. But the only way to know how many people are in favor or not of independence is to ask them. And we asked people. So if it's enough or not, finally, there is a golden rule in democracy. If there is a majority who won't think through the ballot boxes, we must respect that decision.
And what would you have to say to the argument that perhaps all of the people in Spain, in all the other regions, including the Basque region as well, that they should also have a say in a referendum on Catalonian independence?
Well, normally, there is, I think, one single exception in the case of Algeria and the independence of Algeria, but the majority of the referendum for self-determination session, um, the part that want to be seceded is the only part to allowed to vote. That is clear in all the cases in the world. I think there is only this exception, the case of Algeria. But if we accept the idea, before asking that question, I think we must ask the Spanish state if there is or not a right to be independent, to secede. Because if Catalonia has the right to secede, to have our own state, well, that's it. This is a very big and good step in order to solve our conflict. But the problem is not who will vote. The problem, the fundamental problem, is that the Spanish authorities denies the political subject is the Catalonia as a political subject, as a subject that has right of self-determination. That is the problem. And the problem is if Spain respect or not the national reality of Catalonia. So the right of Catalonia to have to exercise the right of self-determination.
And tell me, what is so wrong about the state of Spain that would make people like you and your fellow Catalan separatists so desperate to leave it?
It's not easy to answer this because it's a collection of questions and matters. It's obviously there is historical reasons. Catalonia is a nation, historical nation, European nation, with culture, language, identity, and the last 3 centuries, language, identities, institutions were majority of the time persecuted, banned, prohibited by the Spanish regimes. So there is a fight for survival as a nation. But it's not enough. There is another question linked to the tools and resources we have in our hands or not in order to ensure to protect our society and to ensure the future of the next generations. And after more than 40 years of the Spanish Constitution, all the evidence collected by us shows that there is no possibility in the statu quo, the current statu quo with Spain, to have this opportunity. And there is another collection of arguments because all in last 40 years, we ask the Spanish state to improve our government in different ways. First, proposing a fiscal agreement, then proposing improvement of our self-determination rules, then asking for a non-binding consultation. All of that attempts to improve our status among the Spanish state were failed. So there is one single option for Catalonia in order to survive as a nation, as a society, is to have our own state. There is no simplicity in that project. We are not against Spain. We have nothing against the Spanish language. We are not against the European Union. We don't want to keep our money in our pocket. On the contrary, we want to share and to participate, to develop the other regions in Spain or in Europe less rich. That is a consequence of several decades or centuries trying to survive as a nation. All the attempts are collapsed, are failed.
And what about the argument, though, Mr. Puigdemont, that if Catalonia was allowed to secede from Spain, then the next thing is there'd be a push again from the Basque region to secede, and that could spark off other secessionist movements elsewhere within Europe. And we've seen in, for example, the former Yugoslavia, how destructive these secessions can be, and you can end up with the breakup of a large country into smaller entities.
Well, the case of Yugoslavia is exactly shows the consequences when you deny the right of self-determination. And the right of self-determination is a perfect tool in order to prevent conflicts. And part of that former Yugoslavia now is member of the European Union and are very normal states. No one discuss the right that Slovenia or Croatia has to decide our future. So, and no one has decided to return the former status quo and to join again a new Yugoslavia. So to be independent is not so bad. And well, and there is another reason why the borders are sacred. The borders are decided by people who decide live together, but we can change it, and there is nothing dramatic to change borders. The principle is to respect the right of self-determination. If the Basque country want to have to declare independence, they has the right to do it. That's right. So I think in the 21st century, in order to prevent conflicts, is easier, is help helping people to allow the possibility to decide. And finally, there is another argument. In our time, small and middle states are more effective than the big one. Thanks to technology, thanks to globalization, the knowledge, thanks to information. Now, a small state or middle state has better opportunities than the big one in order to ensure the rest of their citizens access to culture, education, health, progress in general.
I'm not sure everybody would agree with you, particularly maybe I think the leaders of France or Germany or indeed the UK. But what now for you, Mr. Puigdemont? Because you are living in Belgium, you're living in exile. Some will call you a fugitive from justice, whatever their political leanings. So what's your future now?
My more personal future belief, I wake up every day saying to me, probably that could be my last day in exile. And obviously this is not realistic, but that helps me to continue fighting every day far from my family, far from my country. But that is not important. The most important for Catalonia, for Catalan society, is to find a way to solve politically and peacefully and democratically that conflict. And if in some way I can help this, I will work in that direction. Now I'm working from the European Parliament. Tomorrow, I don't know from where, but I will fight until the last day. Not for, I insist, not for to solve my personal situation, but to help my country to find the way to achieve their goals in order to be really free.
And what do you say to those who say you fled Spain and your other Catalan separatist colleagues, the ones who ended up in jail, stayed to face the music?
Well, I was not alone to fled Catalonia. There is other people with me, not only in Belgium but also in Switzerland, and there are also members of my party condemned in Spain. We decide to continue fighting, and the only and to see our rights protected or respected were outside of Spain. I could choose a place where there is not extradition agreement between Spain and that country, like, for example, Spanish King Juan Carlos. But I decided to move in the capital of Europe with a big focus over us in order to explain to the rest of Europe there is a problem. That is a European problem, and we will insist in order to put the Catalan case in the European agenda. And the only way to do this was not from a Spanish prison. It's from here, or the case of Clara Ponsatí from Scotland. So to use our voice, to use our rights to do politics, and to defend our citizens, our colleagues that are in jail, fighting and winning battles in the judiciary field and the political field.
And that was Carles Puigdemont, the former president of Catalonia in Spain, who spearheaded the region's peaceful drive for independence in 2017. And he's also a member of the European Parliament.